The main reason for us being here is because we're trying to expose the fact that Moore-Bick, who's currently chairing the Grenfell Inquiry, is a corrupt judge or a former corrupt judge, and he cannot be trusted.
Bring your banners, come with your union colleagues, come with your housing colleagues, come with your friends, young and old. Let's make noise on the anniversary to remind Theresa May, to remind this government that actually we will not be silenced, we haven't gone away, and we will not be silenced till we have justice.
On October the 30th, 2019, the Grenfell Inquiry report was released. This was the first part of a repeatedly delayed inquiry into the deaths of over 70 people following the horrific tower block fire in London in June 2017. Some were cynical about the timing, given that it was scheduled a day before the UK was set to leave Europe. In the event, Brexit stalled again, and instead the news of a general election dominated news headlines. More experienced commentators noted it was a good day to bury bad news. And so it was that Phase 1 of the Grenfell Inquiry was released, and it was clear that the chairman, Sir Martin Moore-Bick, had built a damning case against the response of the emergency services and, in particular, the inability of the London Fire Brigade to cope with the tragedy.
I'm critical of many aspects of the NFB's response. I consider that these represent significant systemic failings in the organisation of the LFB, and show that it had failed to learn the lessons of the Lakanal House fire.
Important lessons had been missed following the Lakanal fire in London in 2009 when 6 people died, but those failures did not rest solely at the door of the emergency services. In fact, in 2009, following Lakanal, the coroner had written to Conservative Party chairman Eric Pickles asking that the stay put policy be reviewed. No action was taken. London Fire Brigade was extensively criticised by Moore-Bick for maintaining the stay put policy at Grenfell, despite the fact that it is a nationwide policy and was featured in the lobby of Grenfell Tower. A decade after Eric Pickles was asked to review that same stay-put policy, and the London Fire Brigade are extensively blamed for maintaining what has long been left as best practice. Eric Pickles is certainly not alone in being a politician who has thus far managed to escape Moore-Bick's questioning. Will they be in Phase 2 of his inquiry? They should be. Just in case they're not, here they are. Gavin Barwell, he was Housing Minister and also Theresa May's Chief of Staff. Barwell now has a seat in the political house next door since he became a Lord. Another former Housing Minister is Brandon Lewis. He also has questions to answer regarding Grenfell. In fact, together with Pickles and Barwell, all three stand accused of failing to act on findings from the Lakanal fire. There's no doubt there were problems with the authorities' response and communications, but this was down to a combination of reasons, including the rapid speed of the fire, as well as millions of pounds of budget cuts that had previously hit the fire services. Which brings us to the next person so far protected by the Grenfell Inquiry report, James Cleverly, these days cosily ensconced as the Conservative Party chairman in Parliament, used his deciding vote to bring forth significant budget cuts to the London Fire Brigade in 2013. And why were these cuts taken in the first place? Because the London mayor at the time, a Conservative, was very much part of the ideology of austerity and imposed dangerous cuts to public services. And who was that mayor? Why, none other than current British Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
How can cutting fire stations, cutting fire engines, cutting firefighters' posts not be a reduction in fire cover?
Because we're improving fire cover, as I've said several times.
You lied to the people of London in your election.
Get stuck.
As Prime Minister at the time of the Grenfell fire, Theresa May chose Sir Martin Moore-Bick to chair the inquiry, and yet various members of her own political party have yet to answer to their role in the events that may have led to the deaths in Grenfell. Will any of these politicians be brought before the inquiry? That remains to be seen, but judging by Moore-Bick's outline of what he intends to achieve in the next phase, it's doubtful. But there are other members of the political establishment who have thus far remained alarmingly untouched by Martin Moore-Bick's inquiry. Most notably Rockfield in Milan, who oversaw the disastrous refurbishment at Grenfell, and, of course, Nicholas Paget Brown, who ran the local council. The Grenfell community had been in no doubt from the beginning that Paget Brown had plenty to answer to, and in the days following Grenfell, local residents became increasingly angry at the lack of action from the local council.
This is outside the building of Kensington and Chelsea Council. People have come here to demand answers. People are holding up missing signs of their loved ones. It's heartbreaking to be here, actually. The emotion is palpable. People are rushing into Kensington Town Hall now. They're not having this.
These police are protecting the chambers of Kensington and Chelsea executives. They don't stand a chance if this crowd kicks off, that much I do know.
Second priority is this man has to be detained and pushed to
Nicholas Paget Brown was allowed to resign just 2 weeks later. He has yet to answer to numerous allegations, including the fact that 3 years before the fire broke out, residents of Grenfell had written to him asking for an investigation into work on the tower. From the start of the inquiry, it was clear there may be problems, as Martin Moore-Bick said he hadn't planned to look at questions of a social, economic or political nature, which, given the clear social, economic and political nature of the problems of Grenfell Tower, was a problematic premise. Nonetheless, Prime Minister Theresa May agreed with him, and it was on this basis that the Grenfell inquiry began. For observers, it was too narrow a remit to adequately tackle what had taken place and to get to the truth. Call Grant, an activist and father, had problems with the inquiry chair from the beginning and had expressed as such 2 years earlier at a public meeting for the Grenfell community.
I came here because the judge who has been elected to chair your public inquiry, I know that the one thing you want, apart from those things that you're mentioning tonight, is you want the truth. Because on the truth, you will get justice. It's a question of whether or not they are prepared to deliver the truth, because the whole damn system is corrupt, and they will do whatever they possibly can to cover up the truth. What I'm holding here in my hand is a document with Moore-Bick listed on it, and it's a judgment which he delivered after an appeal which I filed, and he dealt with that appeal, which involved the death of one of my children. And Martin Moore-Bick, as Lord Justice Moore-Bick, did whatever he had to do to join with his colleagues to cover up the circumstances of the death of my 15-month-old son.
And then I've reported it to Downing Street since Theresa May has been in, and she was the Home Secretary, or she was the Home Secretary at the time. So as far as I'm concerned, with those documentation, I think I can show conclusively that she or her department must be aware. So if you're aware of Moore-Bick previously deliberately covering up an act, simply because the only way that they were able to get away with this is because there's been no publicity.
I caught up with Call more recently during his regular weekly protest outside the Royal Courts of Justice.
The main reason for us being here is because we're trying to expose the fact that Moore-Bick, who's currently chairing the Grenfell Inquiry, is a corrupt judge or a former corrupt judge, and he cannot be trusted.
The next stage of Moore-Bick's Grenfell inquiry is eagerly awaited. Phase 1 of the Grenfell report makes clear that the cladding on the building, fitted during building upgrade, aided the rapid spread of the fire. It's not too much to expect that those who are responsible for these decisions will be hauled before him. For many still, 2 years on after the horrific and unnecessary deaths, there is still no closure. No convictions, no arrests, just an inquiry that appears to be scapegoating those who came to stop the tragedy rather than those who may have contributed to it in the first place.